Just a short question for you. There are three, but since we are in hurry, I will say just you mentioned that some new churches have not been registered. So, is there any problem with regards to fake representation, but I would like to know, hypothetically, if a new church would like to be registered, and they do, and then there is some misuse of the name or symbol, for example, Serbian Orthodox Church, who is then authorized plaintiff? Can the state intervene? And in my opinion, it shouldn't be the case because there is separation. Or is that Serbian Orthodox Church through lawsuit? There is the civic responsibility, there is criminal responsibility when it comes to fake representation and the use of somebody else's name. Typically it is used in commerce, but in this case we are talking about churches and their registry in the Ministry of Civil Affairs of B&H, and then the prosecutor can ex officio initiate the investigation against the people who used somebody else's symbols, flag, name, symbol, or anything else that actually serve as an identity for an already registered confession. Also, if you registered as a new church or religious community, you must use the symbols that as such have been also entered into the registry. If you use somebody else, there is also the procedure of erasing you from the registration, and there is a procedure done in the Ministry of Justice. So there is procedure that can be disciplinary features, then criminal, civic as well. So if I use a brand name that is registered onto your name, I can seek compensation in the standard procedure to get some material satisfaction.
Oh, thank you very much. No other questions? Yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. I'd like to know the following. Today you've said that the funding is there for religious communities in the Federation of Bosnia-Herzegovina and the ERISS and the B&H level. I think that Mr. Davidovic said yesterday that there is no law on funding, I think. So, now the issue of the relationship between the church and government in the Federation of Bosnia-Herzegovina is vested with the cantons. There are 10 cantons, and they have different administrative organizations. For example, here it is the Secretariat for Religions. The thing is that the Republic of Srpska is centralized, so we have a secretariat. The situation in the federation is more complicated. It's at the funding is at the cantonal level through different projects and calls for funding at the level of the federation and Bosnia-Herzegovina. Thank you. I apologize. I will have to leave a bit earlier. I have another appointment. I have another question, and I do not know who to address the question to. Actually, I do, but I don't know how to formulate it. So you just had a debate. So if it's not a secret, what were you talking about? Bitoy Hyde, the director of the center, said this is a matter for discussion. So if you'll please share this with us, because we do need some discussion, especially if it's constructive. So if it's not a secret, please share with us what you were discussing and why it was said that it should be further discussed. Hello, everyone. Yes, we discussed, Marco and me, some of his positions he shared with us in his presentation, concerning primarily the relationship between the state and the church, but also religious classes in the IRS, for example. So there are different positions here that can be viewed from this or that perspective. And there are countries where the church is completely separate from the state, and there are some other states where they advocate for a symphony of the state and church. They want to bring them together as much as possible. Now, I'm a theologist. I look at things from a different perspective. Whenever the church and state got close too much, whenever a symphony was reached, the church actually was worse off, which means that this relationship is not always good or positive. It can be useful. Both parties may benefit, but it should not be the rule for the future. Why am I saying this? If you look at our Serbian history, let's do it this way. Constantine actually convened the assembly, congregational assembly, and he was not baptized. Also, some of Constantinople's emperors would destroy the churches, and they were Christians. Why? Because of some political arrangements with Turks. And then in some provinces, it was the king or the emperor that had to sign off a building of a temple, and also religious classes in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia disappeared from schools overnight, which means that the destiny of the church depends on the state and its goodwill. Now, we live in the good circumstances. The current administration grants religious freedoms and supports religious communities in general, not just the Serbian Orthodox Church. For example, religious classes in schools now is a witness to that. But who guarantees to us that the next president, the next government in 10, 15 or 20 years would retain this political stance? So the question is that government going to support religious communities through religious classes, allowing the church to leave the temple and act in public? And as a priest, I always follow the following logic. So the church as such should not be in a symbiosis with the state and depend on it, because when communists arrived, there were no religious classes in schools or elsewhere, so we have generations that grew up outside of the Christian milieu. So now we have Serbs, but they are anti-Orthodox, they are anti-Christians, and they actually harmed their people most. So the church needs to find a way to survive in any time, not just when the state looks at it favorably. Maybe the church should organize religious classes in temples so that children could actually learn about Christian teachings, not in schools, not in state-sanctioned institutions. I did teach religious classes. It can be, those teachings could be informative and parochial. In schools, we can be informative, but the teachers in school has nothing to do with the religious life of the child. There are lots of children that have not been baptized. It's not possible to take the child and baptize it, because the parents would come and say, why are you forcing my child to join a religious community without the consent of the parents? Because the parents do not want it, and the children actually allow the child to attend religious classes in school because they don't want to separate their child from other children, which means that the religious classes in schools do have a meaning and purpose to an extent, but when children go to religious classes in the church, then the children actually get baptized, after religious classes. And
Znači, ništa mi ne znači taj spisak vjeroučitelja kad mi pošalje koliko je razreda
And also, the number of the children that take Holy Communion is, the benchmark. So the religious classes in schools are administrative. That's for the state. But when I see the number of children taking the Holy Communion, and when I see their parents, that actually tells me what the spiritual health of the children and their parents is. They need to be part of the religious community. Of course, religious classes in schools are good. It's good, to have them because they may use the knowledge to emotionally get back to the church and faith. But it's very important for the church not to do just that, but to do what it's supposed to do.
And why shouldn't that be a problem that we have religious classes every Saturday or Sunday, just like the Catholics had throughout communism, and they kept their flock that way because they operated in churches, apartments, and so on. And we Serbs relied on the state, and when the state abandoned us, we were thrown under the bus. We waited for another type of state to resolve our problems. Our problems cannot be resolved by the state. It can only be us. We must make sure what it means to fight for religious classes and fight for the soul of every person. So that was the topic of conversation between me and Marco. I also could have a few questions and few comments. What I discerned from what you said is that in the long run, the state is not a very reliable partner because it changes too often. But let's start from religious classes. Is there an administrative or a legal proposal that those things cannot change overnight if the structure changes? That would be a special topic of conversation. You see, I would like to thank the state if they want to help us. However, the state must make such a concept of legislation and relations towards confessions so that these laws, this story that has been well thought through, regardless of the spins of the government. Let's take, for example, Greece. It is a nice example of a country because regardless who there is, they still keep that part called enlightenment, and the Greeks kept it with themselves throughout history, regardless who was in power. And that is when the state thinks about its people. And in Greece, Orthodox Church is so important. Why? Because they preserve the identity of the people, because they have a problem with the Turks. And these people remained as such and kept its identity. And that is what the Serbs also need, not only Serbs, but Balkan people in general. So every state that loves its people will make sure that the main confession should somehow be given an opportunity to operate through legislation, regardless of the political structure that comes next. And that can be done primarily through educational institutions that are owned by the church and media that the church can run, so that church can do just like the Catholics in the West, through different institutions that they had, through different homes that they had. They understood that the state can be in one form one day and in another form in another day, but the church should always be somehow protected, and that is what we miss here. Because, like I say, we always rely on the state, hoping that it would resolve the issues, and the Serbs have this special trigger about the state, always trusting the state and relying. But we are aware that the state betrayed the Serbs so many times through history, so at least when it comes to church, it should not be a sui generis rule. There should be another alternative solution, irrespective of who comes next. Slovenia, for example, back in the days of Yugoslavia, There was one conference, and I remember a lawyer who presented a whole array of different contracts that the state had with Serbian Orthodox Church in Slovenia, and many of them guaranteed something. So you might want to go through them and do some comparative analysis. Maybe you can get something good rather than reinventing the wheel. And another point of view about religious classes. Is there any problem in organizing the classes, or is the only problem that these religious classes should be part of school, or should they take place in the buildings of Serbian Orthodox Church? As far as I know, in Ljubljana, and I know the Serbian priest in Ljubljana, Ivo Poljac, and every Wednesday they do have religious classes, and they even have classes of the Serbian language. I propose that Slavoljub should answer the question, and he is actually an inspector for religious classes, so if you allow me. Thank you for the organization, and yesterday I discussed this with Dusan, and I said how interesting it is that the topic of religious classes was not part of this conference, but it came about as a rather interesting topic, so it might be a topic for a future conference. In my opinion, education is education. If the subject of religious classes is in schools, it has to be in schools. If there is a syllabus, if there is a curricula, it has to be evaluated somehow. Starting from work, endeavor, it has to be evaluated and marked. If it is supposed to be done outside of the school, how could we evaluate it? Father Dragan put it nicely. We have schools. We give certain information about faith, the nation, moral. However, now there should be maybe some upgrade so that the church steps forward, so that what they learn in schools could be practiced in the real life. Father Dragan said maybe later in life they will recall this and practice it in life, like in Greece, a young person in Greece. Originally, they are an anarchist until the age of 14, and then from the age of 14 to 20, they are mainly communists. Then they mature, they become Democrats, and the same in church. In the beginning, they are religious, and then they vanish. But when they get married and when they get the first child, they go back to church, and that is what matters. The religious classes will instill something in a person. When it will germinate, who knows? But the important thing is that we planted the seed. And if the church could make an addition on Saturday, Wednesdays through certain work in line with their parish work. And like Father Dragan said, in Greece, this functioned the way it did. However, they are facing other problems nowadays. Problems because there are more Muslims in Greece, primarily by the arrival of Albanians, and they now have families and their children are in schools. However, there is no Islam religious classes in schools because it is primarily an Orthodox country. Now, how can they resolve this? Or problem, shall I say? If they allow that Islam religious classes enter schools, then you slowly destroy entire system. If they find another alternative subject such as the culture of religion, it will not be a confessional science. Then, like we said yesterday, maybe here we have the best model. We have confessional religious classes, and those who do not want to attend any, they don't attend it. And an interesting piece of information, during fast a few days ago in bakery, a small girl asks if is there any food, fast food for fasting, and they ask the lady, why do they practice fasts so much now? It is mainly because of the religious teachers. So it is very beneficial that religious classes are there, but there definitely should be a step forward to have it rounded up.
If I may add, it turns out, you highlighted the issue of valuation, the efforts, etc. I mean, given the multiculturalism, or religions, here in the Republic of Srpska, I don't think that we should tackle this problem now, because if you give them an option which religious classes to attend, Orthodox, Catholic or Islamic, and obviously children do not have to attend religious classes at all, then you cannot value what's going on. I think that the church should take on a role there and to raise it to a different level. Like a private space that's not school. Because practically speaking, you have religious classes that is valued. When I say valued, there are grades, right, in schools. But the children who do not attend religious classes in schools are not graded, right? And then there are different maybe grades. There are different standards for grades in schools. Yeah, but that's like a subject in a school. It's not a program. As in the Republic of Serbia, it's a subject, a school subject. No, just to add, the thing is that all three religious classes have curricula and textbooks are approved by the Pedagogical Institute of the ERISS, or whichever way. But they are part of the official educational system of the ERISS. And that's why they are measurable, etc. There are grades, school grades, right? But yes, but what about those who are not required? They are not graded. Yes, there is no grades, and in the secondary school they have an alternative course. In the RS, 92% of pupils attend Orthodox religious classes, 6% Islamic, and 2% either do not attend or attend catechism, Catholic. In secondary schools, 67 are Orthodox, 5% Islamic, and the remaining take alternative subject or Catholic catechesis. And has anyone proposed that there is no grades? Yes, but then it comes to something else. It is the church that insists on it, because what in Serbs, what's not valued is not acceptable. Because in the Western countries, even regular schools, children are not graded. In our schools, all subjects are graded. Well, thank you for comprehensive information. I've learned a lot. I have a question, if I may, for the professor. So when I speak about Bosnia-Herzegovina, I always say that this is not a crossroads of several cultures, but civilizations, because it's different when you say cultures and civilizations. So this is a crossroads of two civilizations. But you talked about something that I have not thought about, and that's the destruction of symbols. In the Middle East, there are many more cultures, many more peoples, ethnic and religious communities. They do not destroy each other's symbols that much, unlike here. And over the past 100 years, it's been mostly symbols that have been destroyed. So, is this destruction, in a way, escaping one's own past, or how? Especially in this territory, why are symbols of the others destroyed so much? Now you've put me in a difficult position. I mean, what to answer? Why do we see the destruction of symbols, unlike in other geographical areas? Perhaps the answer could be following the genesis of the differentiation of peoples here is complex. We had the Islamization process, so the Orthodox population and Catholic population were converted into Islam. Maybe that's one of the reasons, because this common history and closeness produces this peculiar sentiment of intolerance. Maybe this has roots in the past and getting away from one's true past. And this is a difficult question. I should give it some thought, you see. So this is a very superficial answer, I'd say. So much. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. This has just made me recall a film. Saladin entered Jerusalem and found the cross, and it was down, and he erected it. Yes. We as a society should work a lot on this, and I guess this practice will disappear. We have another question. Just briefly, I'm sorry that Mr. Romic is not here. This question is about law as well, but also the substance. About the restitution. Yesterday we had the gentleman from the Islamic community who spoke about assets confiscated during the communism. They also referred to the agrarian reform, etc., during the kingdom. But maybe this question is for our priest, Mr. Grujic, because we always wait for the events to happen and only then start considering certain issues. Is the Serbian Orthodox Church specifically working on this issue, meaning does it intend to return the property taken from other communities during the Ottoman occupation? Because we know when certain religious buildings were rehabilitated, underneath, in the foundations, churches were discovered, altars, etc. So we know who the property actually belongs, and we have archives. For example, when the Ottoman Empire arrived, it made an inventory of assets. So are you going to insist on having the facts straight, meaning which assets belong to whom? And is it one of the fundamental rights of religious communities? So much about that. This question is very complex and difficult. And in a way, it is relevant to the events in Bosnia-Herzegovina, including many conflicts we have seen in this area. Because this is about the identity of the peoples who live here in this area. The cultural and religious identity, and we see it in cemeteries, in churches, etc., throughout the history, is an indicator of what Bosnia-Herzegovina is. That is how Bosnia-Herzegovina developed throughout centuries. So this entire narrative about Christianity, Islam, different empires that occupy Bosnia-Herzegovina is in the nub of the question of Davor has asked. If we answer this question, then we would have an answer to the entire geopolitical and then political, social, any other issue here. And it's impossible to answer this question. I've just consulted with Slavoljub. Unfortunately, we do not have any legislation. We do not have an official inventory to be able to refer to when claiming what belongs to whom. Many things have been destroyed, confiscated, taken away. We don't have the sources that we can refer to. What remains is the oral word, what the religious communities know and what the people know, saying, yes, this used to be a Christian church, and then maybe the research, archaeological or whatever could follow, to understand who built the church. Anything here can be subject to speculation, denial, political conflict, and so on.
And that is actually the biggest problem here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because we have several identities that maybe stemmed from maybe one identity, and now everyone is trying to give themselves the prerogative of being the only one, and that is actually the reason why we have a problem there, the political problem or any other problem, because we simply cannot view historical facts. And then if you don't view historical facts, then you don't view the religious facts and so on. So if you take just this in account, Serbian Orthodox Church has books of births, weddings, only after World War II. So all the books of Serbian Orthodox Church during World War II were burnt. Ustaša did it, thus fully eradicating every trace of the life of the Serbs until World War II. Now imagine the time spent, the number of people baptized, buried, weddings, books kept in monasteries, parishes, wherever there were Orthodox Serbs. The church was very meticulous in keeping registries of every person, because that was the book of the living. And these included names, important people, dates. And the first thing that the Ustaše did is they burnt all these books in monasteries and churches, just like Hitler first bombed in Belgrade the National Library. So he didn't bother to bomb some military targets. He wanted to bomb the cultural hub to try to fully erase their identity. Unfortunately, that is happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina too. So this is a very complex issue, and everything that we now have is a mere word. I was just going to say that here there is always rule of ideology over science. The first census was 1882, and that is the first census and measuring in Bosnia. Before that, we only had something from 1642 and one from 1469 in Bosnia, which when we were not under the Turks yet. And the only thing that we have now is legacy, but new archaeological research shows a lot of other evidence, but it's such a long process, and science will only later overcome ideology. Thank you for your answers. They have been very illustrative and very valuable for us. Very interesting from what we heard about the destruction of church books. Now we come to the knowledge and facts that the Turks left them alone, and then came other enemies and destroyed them. The Turks could have destroyed them, but they didn't. So maybe this can be the sphere of destroying the symbols. Thank you once again. To be more formal, thank you, Professor Bogdan. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen from Romania, gentlemen from Slovenia, also from the Institute, all the presenters, all of you who were with us yesterday and today, and as guests and in discussions. I think we did a good or interesting part of the work. Yesterday we mentioned that every crisis is actually a challenge and an opportunity. So it's up to us too. As our priest Athanasius said, it is up to us to paint over no matter how many graffitis there are. So we'll see what this conference will yield and leverage. We've exchanged some nice ideas with Monsignor Hocevar and other participants, and we'll see how this goes on. This next year maybe here again or somewhere else, but I think in any case it is important that apart from the dialogue that must be open constantly, even at this level, this is not the highest possible level, but it's very good that we have this dialogue. We'll see that maybe we do some things together. Of course, the priest Dragan Grujic has a lot of experience in our religious council of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and there are different problems there, and I know that his intentions were good. Unfortunately, ideology is at work there too, and that is something that we mentioned yesterday, how traditional churches, and I include Islamic community there too, how we can avoid tribalism to make it possible to have consensus when joint future of these peoples is discussed. It is a complex and radicalized matter. Additionally, through this resolution yesterday from the United Nations, now we have a new challenge: how to prevent Western centers of power, especially Germany, which they still see us as a lower race, all of us. How can we prevent that from additionally spoiling the relations between peoples in the region? And we will have to invest additional effort and seek responsible people and try to see how to avoid additional radicalization that some other Western countries would like to see. That is why I think that this conference gained even more importance, and after this we will have to sit together and see what we can do, maybe even intensify our activities. Thank you. Let's take the certificates and please use them for the restaurant. Thank you. Goodbye. Just a few sentences more to formally conclude the conference. I agree with everything that my colleague Pavlović said. I would like also to add that this was a very good conference given the papers that we heard, and primarily because of the discussion that we heard. After discussion, after every panel, we all took a lot from the discussion. Secondly, I would like to thank the host, the Center for Socio-Political Research, first of all the director and his associate, Ms. Svetlana Marković, for a great job that we did. I think that we will all carry good emotions from here. And also I would like to thank our translators, interpreters, who worked very hard to do their important work. So, thank you.